Okay, the next presentation, ladies and gentlemen, is Mr. Bernard Rowe, the Managing Director of Global Geoscience Limited. Bernard is a geologist with more than 25 years international experience in mineral exploration, a founding shareholder of Global Geoscience. He has been the Managing Director since the company's IPO in 2007, with the objective of making a major greenfield mineral discovery. Global identified exploration properties that attracted funding from Cisco in a Nevada gold property in 2012 and Antofagasta in Arizona copper property in 2013. His many years of exploring in Nevada paid off with the acquisition of Global's flagship Rhyolite Ridge lithium-boron project in 2016. Please welcome Bernard Rowe.
Thank you, Marcus, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We'll mix it up a bit now. Obviously, we've heard a number of really great stories on underground gold in WA, but Rhyolite Ridge is quite a different beast. It's a lithium and boron deposit. It's large, it's shallow, and it's located in one of the most favourable mining jurisdictions in the world in Nevada. What I'm sure you've looked at and heard many lithium stories over the last few years, but what really differentiates Rhyolite Ridge as a lithium deposit is that it's got a lot of boron with it. And boron actually in this deposit accounts for about somewhere between 30 and 40% of the revenue. The other key difference is that it's in a rock, so you could by definition call it hard rock, but it's totally different than spodumene. So the lithium and boron that's in the Rhyolite Ridge ore can be extracted using sulfuric acid. So really it's similar to treating a oxide copper deposit in that sense. And thirdly, what also makes it very different is where it's located. In America, there really are very little in the way of lithium resources in the US. It's on the strategic metals list, and in the case of boron, there's only one large boron deposit in the United States, Boron, California, and really there's very few others anywhere in the world outside of Turkey. Disclaimer. So, our aim of Global Geoscience is to deliver the first major lithium and boron, lithium mine in the United States. Currently, there is only one, Silver Peak. It produces about 4,000 tonnes a year of lithium carbonate owned by Albemarle. So it's a very small mine. It's very old. It's the very first brine deposit developed in the world in the 1960s. But we're also aiming to produce what would be the next, globally, the next major boron deposit. You can see there the map of Nevada shows the location of those deposits, but Rhyolite Ridge, because of the size and location, is a globally significant lithium and boron deposit, each in its own right. Now, I found these rather unusual symbols on the Royal Society of Chemists website recently, and I thought I'm going to use those in my presentation because they're quite bizarre looking images. So the one on the left is the alchemist's symbol for lithium. Now, where the name lithium actually came from, according to the Royal Society, is that it was first discovered in a rock. Most other alkali metals, which are very reactive, were originally found in organics, plants. But lithium was found in a rock, and hence the Greek word lithos for rock. So that explains this unusual symbol on the left. But the even more bizarre symbol on the right is pure boron. And pure boron is a dark and amorphous sort of powder, and however it's used in a whole myriad of industries, including an important trace element or micronutrient in agriculture. So that is a boron tree made out of pure boron powder, and really strange sort of images. But the two of them together are extremely rare. There's only really known of two large deposits where you have, in these sorts of concentrations, lithium and boron together. The other thing I just wanted to quickly mention while we're looking at these rather unusual images is that elsewhere on that Royal Society's website, there's some really interesting words which I'm going to read to you, written by someone who's posted it up on there. If I had to choose a person to represent gold, I would choose a young and ambitious stockbroker, a bit flashy and not great at forming relationships. For helium, I would choose an airy-fairy blonde with a squeaky voice but with aspirations to join the nobility. But what about for boron? Well, at first glance, during the working week at any rate, I would choose a boring middle-aged accountant wearing brown corduroys and a tweed jacket, but with an unexpected side to him in his spare time: skydiving, motorbike riding, and a member of a highly dubious society that indulges in partner swapping. So, I'm going to tell you a little bit about boron in the remaining time that I have, but come by our booth afterwards and talk to Michael LePage, who's down here with me, the ex-sales and marketing director for Rio Tinto Industrial Minerals, who knows way more about boron and the unusual properties, and would be happy to talk to you about it. Okay, so I said these are rare deposits. This map shows lithium in green dots around the world. Australia and South America, obviously, the two well-known regions of the world that really produce all of today's lithium production. In the case of boron, there's only really two large fields in the world, and that's Boron, California, which is owned by Rio Tinto, and Turkey. And then if you combine the two and say, well, okay, well, where do we get lithium and boron together? There are only two known deposits of this sort of scale anywhere in the world. Jadar in Serbia, which you've, I'm sure, heard about Rio Tinto talking about. They're currently doing a pre-feasibility study there. It's a deep and underground deposit. And Rhyolite Ridge. In Rhyolite Ridge, large, simple, sticking out of the ground and located in Nevada. Now, another advantage that Rhyolite Ridge has is its location on the west coast of the United States. So the large markets for borates and to some extent lithium as well, or to a large extent lithium, are the Asian countries, China, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and the United States. So a location on the west coast of the US for any industrial mineral is a really advantageous location. And obviously that relates to low-cost shipping from the west coast into Asia. So on borates, I'm not going to talk too much about lithium. I think everyone knows where lithium gets used, but I will touch on it, but I want to spend a little bit more time on the borates and mention that there's a myriad of uses for borates. And in fact, even this morning, each of you have probably picked up or touched or used a half a dozen at least items that have got boron in them without even knowing about it. And the chart on the left there shows that there's a lot of different industries that use boron, and in fact all of them use quite sizable amounts of boron. So there's not a one concentrated focus use. It's across borosilicate glass, insulation, ceramics, textile fabrics, agriculture, and so on. So there's a really broad use of this product, and which has major advantages as an industrial mineral. Importantly, boron can't be substituted, or there's very few substitutes anyway. So boron is going to be here to stay, and the quantity of boron is actually going to be increasing, as particularly in the borosilicate glass area, but across the board, agriculture as well. And really the uses of boron are intimately tied to three things: urbanisation, energy efficiency, and agriculture. So the need to feed, the need to conserve energy with insulation, and building houses and people living in houses. The boron market, it's about $3.2 billion market, so it's actually fairly similar to the size in dollar terms of the lithium market. But really why you don't hear much about it, and I'm sure this is probably one of the first boron talks at Diggers, I'd imagine, is that it's a duopoly, and it's ETI, the Turkish government, and Rio Tinto. And in fact, Rio Tinto, I think, have found basically every boron deposit in the world, including the ones in Turkey. So it's an opaque business. There's no spot price, there's no market price, it's contracts business to business, and it's really intricately tied to the US housing and US, China and housing markets, and across a range of uses which I've already used. Interestingly, there's also quite a lot of overlap in the use of lithium with boron, particularly in the borosilicate glass area, where companies like Corning, for example, add lithium for various reasons to their glass products. Given the importance of the industries and the growing importance of boron within those industries, we're looking at a sort of stable growth in demand of 4 to 5%. There's an ideal opportunity for a new deposit to come into the market with the tightening of supply that we're expecting around 2021. And that ties into Rio Tinto's mine in Boron, California, getting towards the, in the latter stages of its life. It's been in operation for many decades, and the increasing use of the product in solar and agriculture and specialty glass. So we see the customers of boron are going to very much welcome a third entrant into the space. There are a couple of other companies that produce small amounts of boron, so when I say a third entrant, I'm talking about large quantities, hundreds of thousands of tonnes of the material. On lithium, I'm not going to dwell on this, other than to say that really we hear a lot in the media and news about oversupply of lithium in the short term. That may or may not be the case, but what we know is that if projected electric vehicle take-up happens as we think it will, then really it's 2025 and beyond through to 2030 as that really ramps up. And so we currently see about 250,000 tonnes of demand for lithium carbonate. That's going to be up around above 1 million to 1.5 or up to 2 million tonnes of demand by 2030. So huge growth beyond 2025, which relates to the uptake of electric vehicles. Some pricing information there, I'm going to pass over that very quickly, but we're happy to discuss it later, and myself and Michael. But we're using prices of around about $700 a tonne for boric acid and around $10,000 to $12,000 a tonne for lithium carbonate, and that's based on analysing a number of different forecasts from various independent sources. Global Geoscience, it's where ASX listed, ASX 300 company. We have a market cap a bit over 400 million. We have around about $80 million in the bank, so we're fully funded all the way through to completion of a definitive feasibility study and decision to construct. James Callaway is the chairman, the former chairman of Orocobre. Alan Davies, who many of you will know the name, former head of several divisions within Rio Tinto, including industrial minerals and energy, which included the Borates business. So Alan is on our board. John Hofmeister, former president of Shell in North America and an energy person. James and John are both based in Houston. Some advantages of Rhyolite Ridge. I'm not going to run through all of those. It's large, it's a simple deposit, it's flat lying, it's easy to mine. The processing involves no new technology, and you end up with lithium carbonate and boric acid as end products at the mine site. There's two revenue streams, I mentioned that before, about 60 to 65% of the revenue from the lithium and around 35 to 40% from the boron. It's amenable to any kind of acid leaching that you want to try. We've done lots of acid test work over the last 18 months. You can vat leach it, you can heap leach it, you can agitation tank leach it. It works any which way you like. We're going to do vat leaching, but for reasons I'll explain. But it's very, very straightforward, simple processing. If you want to compare it to other lithium sources, I've already touched on some of this. The key thing here is that it doesn't, for a hard rock deposit, which conventional open pit mining, it doesn't require any roasting. So you don't need to have a concentrate sent somewhere else, ideally or currently for spodumene to China for conversion. Here you can leach it into solution, and then the back end part of the processing is similar to a brine in taking the lithium out and the boron out. So really the processing is mining and crushing, acid leaching, evaporation and crystallisation. This is a picture of the material and how different it is. The North American market has seen many sedimentary deposits of lithium over the years, and most of them are, or nearly all of them, are clay type deposits. The difference with Rhyolite Ridge is that this lithium and boron ore doesn't actually contain I shouldn't say ore, this lithium and boron mineralisation doesn't contain any or very little clay. So all of a sudden, the problems of filtration and solid liquid separation disappear, and the fact that it's acid leachable means you've got a very easy mechanism for getting the stuff into solution. So at Rhyolite Ridge there's two parts to the deposit, sitting on top of each other, but very, very separate to each other, very simple to mine, there's no dilution between the two. But of that lithium and boron mineralisation that's easy to process and leach, there's about 137 million tonnes of it. It contains about 1,800 ppm lithium and about 12,500 ppm of boron, which is about 1.3 million tonnes of lithium carbonate and just under 10 million tonnes of boric acid. That's the stuff that we're going to be processing. The photo on the right side is from the exact same drill hole, lithium clay mineralisation that we're just going to stockpile and worry about later if someone works out a way how to process that stuff. The photo on the right, the lithium and boron content of that rock gives a value of about $150 a tonne in situ contained value. So it's quite valuable material. It's thick, it's flat lying, and it's simple geology. So the blue line, or the blue polygons there are the lithium and boron mineralisation, and the grey are the clays that are clay-rich lithium, lithium-rich clay, sitting on top and underneath. But really, the only thing we're focusing on is that blue lithium-boron mineralisation. It occurs in two lenses, and they're 20 metres plus thick, and you don't get any internal dilution at all. You're either in it or you're not. 75% of that resource is in the indicated category. We're doing a PFS. It'll be finished in about a week, in a month, but when we'll be releasing it probably in the back half of September, certainly during this quarter. We're looking at 3 to 4 million tonne mining rate. That's going to give about 20,000 tonnes of lithium carbonate and 160,000 tonnes of boric acid. In dollar terms, that's roughly $300 million worth of lithium carbonate and about $100 million worth of boric acid. There's 100 million tonnes in the mineable mining plan, and we're going to do acid leaching, we're going to stockpile the clays. We will have a sulfuric acid plant on site to generate sulfuric acid, which will then also generate all the steam and electricity we need to run the plant. And we would leach. There's no tailings required, there's no evaporation ponds. The residue from the leach process will just be washed, filtered, and then dry stacked. And it's coarse, it's a 1-inch crush, so it's very easy to wash and filter it. Plan of the deposit and drill pattern. There's a number of different pit scenarios, but we're starting off with a small footprint pit. That's a sort of a permitting requirement in Nevada if you're going to have it permitted through a sort of an expedited procedure. So we intend to progress all through that 15 million tonne, 34 million tonne and 92 million tonne pit, but we just put this in to show that it's a small footprint pit to begin with. And interestingly, you'll see that the lithium grades are highest in that initial pit. So that also is an added benefit of starting mining down in the south western corner where we're proposing. I know I was trying to sort of speed through this so that we can get a cup of coffee on time and don't sort of eat into the other speakers in the next session. Processing plant, vat leach with a sulfuric acid plant on site. We get 75 to 80% total recoveries. Our targeted sort of cash costs, we haven't published the actual cash costs yet, but we will in the PFS obviously, but we've said targeted cash costs for the lithium about $3,500 to $4,500 a tonne, and for the boric acid around $400 or $500 a tonne cash costs. So certainly, very, very healthy margins on the basis of that, and using, reasonably conservative pricing. The timetable, pre-feasibility is finishing this quarter, as I've already mentioned. We're straight into DFS. In fact, we've already started the DFS drilling. The environmental permitting process is underway. We expect to have the DFS and the environmental permitting completed by the September quarter of next year, so just after the mid-year next year. We're funded all the way through until the end of 19, when we will be making a decision on construction, and we're starting the long lead time engineering items to make sure we sort of speed up the construction process. with an anticipated sort of production around the middle of 2021. I'll leave it there. That's a summary I've already mentioned elsewhere in the talk, but happy to take a question if we've got time, Marcus.
Is there any questions for Bernard? Down the front. Perhaps just a short question before we break for morning tea.
Hi Bernard, just quickly, do you expect any issues over that approval process? You know, like, is there anything really tricky that typically occurs in where you're based? Secondly, what order of magnitude capex are we talking about how long to construct the plant?
So on the permitting, I've worked in Nevada for over 10 years, and this is a very benign area within Nevada. So no, there's two ways to permit a mine in Nevada. One is an environmental approval process, which takes about 6 months once you've done your baseline studies, and the other is an EIS. This area, all the indications from the government are to date that this area will be processed through an environmental assessment. But that final decision has not been made by the government yet, because they won't until you've finished all your baseline. But there is nothing that looks like it's going to hold that up. And in Nevada, it just depends entirely where you are within the state and, you know, sensitivity of the area. This is a very benign area, no competing land use, and, you know, no protected sage grouse or anything like that. So straightforward. You asked about the CapEx. It is in the table there. I ran through things to speed up a bit of time, but what we've said on CapEx is obviously we've got the PFS coming out, so we'll detail it in there. But just broadly speaking, it's going to be in the range that you see in other lithium deposits of sort of $15,000 to $18,000 of CapEx per tonne of lithium carbonate. So, you know, a 20,000 tonne per annum lithium carbonate operation, you would expect to have CapEx in the order of, you know, $300 million and upwards, based on $15,000 a tonne. But remember, in the case of Rhyolite Ridge, we're producing 20,000 tonnes of lithium carbonate and, you know, 150 or 60,000 tonnes of boric acid. So equivalent would be a 30,000 tonne per annum lithium carbonate operation, if you like to look at it in equivalent terms. 18 months, but you can, if we, the long lead time in the construction is a sulfuric acid plant, so if you can start that early, which is what we're intending on doing, then, you know, 12 to 18 months.
We'll leave it there. Thanks, Bernard.
No worries. Thank you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll break for morning tea and we'll reconvene at 10:40. Thank you.